Malcolm Washington sits frozen in the airport VIP lounge, staring at his reflection in the mirror. His hand trembling as it touches the jagged patches where his hair used to be. His phone buzzes with urgent notifications. SkySoar Airlines stocks plummeting. A live news broadcast shows protests erupting outside all SkySoar terminals nationwide. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story of justice served. Now let's find out how a so-called joke destroyed an entire airline corporation. Malcolm Washington was not a man who had things handed to him. Growing up in the rough East Lake neighborhood of Atlanta, life had been a constant uphill battle. When he was just 8 years old, his father was killed in a workplace accident at the factory where he worked double shifts. 3 years later, his mother succumbed to breast cancer that went undiagnosed until it was too late, a tragic consequence of inadequate healthcare access in their community. Raised by his grandmother, Eloise Washington, a former schoolteacher with an iron will and unwavering belief in education, Malcolm learned early that he would need to be exceptional just to be considered equal. "You must be twice as good to get half as much," Grandma Eloise would remind him. Those words became the foundation of his work ethic. In their small apartment with peeling paint and unreliable heat, Malcolm would study by flashlight when the electricity was cut off. Despite attending an underfunded public school with outdated textbooks, he managed to achieve a perfect 4 gigapascals. His exceptional SAT scores and compelling personal essay earned him a full scholarship to MIT. College presented a whole new set of challenges. Malcolm was one of only 17 black students in his engineering class of 300. The culture shock was immediate and brutal. His roommate moved out after the first week, claiming he wasn't comfortable. Professors often mistook him for other black students. In group projects, his ideas were ignored until a white classmate repeated them. During his sophomore year, campus security stopped him 3 times in 1 month while walking to the library at night, demanding to see his student ID. "It was like having to prove I belonged there every single day," Malcolm would later tell Forbes magazine. "But proving people wrong became my specialty." Despite the obstacles, Malcolm graduated top of his class with dual degrees in computer science and business administration. His thesis project, a revolutionary algorithm for predictive data analysis, caught the attention of several tech companies who offered him positions. Instead of accepting, Malcolm took a risk and decided to build something of his own. Nexus Innovations began in Malcolm's tiny studio apartment, with just 3 employees himself, his college friend Derek Taylor, and programmer Sofia Rodriguez. Their mission was to create AI-driven solutions for supply chain logistics. The early years were lean and grueling. 60 venture capital firms rejected his pitch. Many cited lack of market fit, but Malcolm couldn't help noticing how the white founders with similar ideas secured funding easily. "One investor actually told me I didn't look like a tech founder," Malcolm recalled in his best-selling memoir Code of Conduct. Another suggested I bring a white friend to pitch meetings to increase investor comfort. The turning point came when Eloise Washington, then 78, took out a second mortgage on her home to invest in her grandson's dream. With that initial $150,000, Malcolm secured his first major client, a regional grocery chain, struggling with inventory management. Within 6 months, Nexus Innovations saved them over $2 million in waste reduction. Success bred success. By year 5, Nexus had offices in Atlanta, San Francisco, and Chicago, with over 300 employees. Malcolm's reputation for brilliant solutions delivered on time and under budget made him the go-to consultant for Fortune 500 companies. When Nexus went public in 2019, the IPO valuation exceeded $4 billion. Eloise, still sharp at 85, rang the opening bell alongside her grandson. Through it all, Malcolm maintained the impeccable professionalism his grandmother had instilled in him. He was known for his tailored Armani suits, his collection of handcrafted Italian leather shoes, and his meticulously maintained low-cut hair, always freshly trimmed weekly by the same barber he'd been seeing since college. His appearance wasn't vanity, it was armor in a world that judged him more harshly than his white counterparts. When you're a black man in corporate America, your appearance isn't just personal expression, it's political, he explained during a Black History Month keynote address. I wish it wasn't true, but I know I'm scrutinized differently. One wrinkled shirt can undermine years of work. Now, at 42, Malcolm Washington was a force to be reckoned with. Nexus Innovations had grown into a Fortune 500 company with over 5,000 employees worldwide and annual revenue exceeding $800 million. The company's AI solutions were revolutionizing supply chains across industries, from retail to healthcare to manufacturing. The upcoming board meeting in San Francisco was potentially the most significant of Malcolm's career. Nexus was finalizing a merger with Horizon Technologies, a deal worth $1.2 billion that would position them to compete directly with Amazon's logistics division. The papers were ready, lawyers had vetted every clause, but the board wanted to meet Malcolm in person for the final handshake before signing. When booking his flight from Atlanta to San Francisco, Malcolm specifically chose SkySoar Airlines premium service. The airline had recently launched an aggressive marketing campaign, showcasing their commitment to diversity and inclusion. Their new CEO, Gregory Peterson, had appeared on CNBC discussing the company's initiatives to combat discrimination and provide exceptional service to all passengers. The airline had even partnered with several Black-owned businesses to supply in-flight products. I appreciate companies making genuine efforts toward equality, Malcolm told his assistant Grace Turner as she confirmed his booking. And their direct flight gets me there with enough time to prepare for the meeting. Little did he know that his decision to fly SkySoar would set in motion a chain of events that would rock the aviation industry to its core. The Atlanta International Airport bustled with the usual chaos of a Friday morning as Malcolm Washington entered the exclusive SkySoar Premium Lounge. Rolling his Italian leather carry-on behind him, he approached the reception desk with the practiced ease of someone who traveled frequently. Despite the early hour, Malcolm was impeccably dressed in a charcoal Tom Ford suit, his posture straight, his presence commanding. "Good morning," he greeted the receptionist, a young white woman named Jennifer Mitchell, according to her nameplate. Malcolm Washington Premium member. He handed over his digital membership card and boarding pass. Jennifer's eyebrows raised slightly as she scanned his credentials. "Oh, Mr. Washington, I didn't." She trailed off, then quickly composed herself. "I mean, welcome to our premium lounge. We don't often see members of your caliber here." Malcolm had become adept at recognizing the subtle shift in tone when people realized who he was. The pause, the recalibration, the sudden formality tinged with surprise. He'd experienced it countless times, that moment when someone realized the black man standing before them was not just any passenger but a high-profile CEO. "Thank you," he replied neutrally, accepting his credentials back. "Bradley will show you to our VIP section," Jennifer said, gesturing toward a tall blond man in his mid-30s, wearing the distinctive Navy uniform of SkySoar's premium cabin crew. Bradley Parker approached with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mr. Washington, right this way, please." His tone was polite but carried an undercurrent of something Malcolm couldn't quite place, perhaps skepticism or amusement. As they walked through the lounge, Malcolm noticed how Bradley's eyes flicked over his suit, his watch, his briefcase, as if mentally calculating their worth or questioning their authenticity. "So what brings you to premium today?" Bradley asked, the emphasis on "you" almost imperceptible but unmistakable to Malcolm's trained ear. "Business or pleasure?" "Business," Malcolm replied simply. "Board meeting in San Francisco." Board meeting, huh? Bradley's smile widened slightly. For which company? Nexus Innovations. I'm the CEO. A flicker of something surprised disbelief crossed Bradley's face before he quickly schooled his features. Well, aren't you full of surprises? Here's our VIP section, the quietest spot in the lounge. The VIP area was separated from the main lounge by frosted glass partitions, plush leather armchairs, individual charging stations, and a private bar stocked with premium spirits created an atmosphere of exclusivity. Ryan will be taking care of you today, Bradley said, gesturing toward another flight attendant, arranging glassware behind the bar. If you need anything unusual, just let him know. Malcolm caught the slight emphasis on unusual but chose to ignore it. Throughout his career, he'd learned to pick his battles carefully. Ryan Cooper was shorter than Bradley, with reddish hair and freckles scattered across his pale face. His smile seemed genuinely friendly as he approached. Welcome, Mr. Washington. Can I get you something to drink? Perhaps some coffee or fresh juice to start your day? Coffee would be great, thank you. Black, no sugar. As Ryan prepared the coffee, Malcolm set up his temporary workstation, arranging his laptop and files on the marble-topped table. He had planned to review the final merger documents before the flight. Here you go, sir, Ryan said, placing the coffee beside him. Black like you asked. He paused, then added with a smirk. Bradley mentioned you're supposedly a CEO. That's pretty cool. The word supposedly hung in the air between them. Malcolm had heard this kind of coded language too many times before the subtle questioning of his credentials, the implication that he couldn't possibly be who he claimed to be. Yes, Nexus Innovations, Malcolm replied evenly. We specialize in AI-driven logistics solutions. Right. Ryan nodded his expression, making it clear he either didn't believe Malcolm or had no idea what those words meant. Well, enjoy your coffee, sir. As Ryan walked away, Malcolm caught him exchanging glances with Bradley at the bar. Their shared smirk made his stomach tighten, a familiar feeling of being the outsider, the subject of derision. Malcolm turned his attention to his work, determined not to let their behavior distract him. The merger documents required his full concentration, hundreds of pages of legal language that would determine the future of his company. An hour later, a new face appeared at his table, a young black woman in a SkySoar uniform. Her nameplate read, Tiana Robinson. Mr. Washington, I'm so sorry to interrupt your work, she said, her voice professional but warm. I just wanted to check if you needed anything else. Your flight has been delayed by 3 hours due to mechanical issues with the aircraft. Malcolm checked his watch, calculating the impact on his schedule. Thank you for letting me know, Tiana. I'll need to make some calls to adjust my meetings. Of course, sir. We have private call rooms if you'd prefer more privacy, she offered, gesturing toward a corridor behind the bar. That would be helpful, thank you. As Tiana led him to the private rooms, Malcolm overheard Bradley's voice from behind the bar. Can you believe it? He acts like he owns the place. I checked his boarding pass. He's in premium, but I bet it's his first time. Probably using miles he got from some credit card scheme. Ryan's laughter followed. Did you see that watch? Has to be fake. No way he could afford the real thing. Malcolm pretended not to hear, but he noticed Tiana's shoulders tense as she quickened her pace. I apologize for my colleagues, Mr. Washington, she said quietly as they reached the private room. That's not representative of SkySoar's values. Unfortunately, it's representative of experiences I've had many times before, Malcolm replied. But I appreciate your professionalism, Tiana. After making his necessary calls, including explaining the delay to Grace and rescheduling his pre-meeting dinner, Malcolm felt fatigue setting in. The 4 a.m. wake-up call was catching up to him. With 3 hours to kill before the flight, he decided to take advantage of the lounge's resting facilities. Is there somewhere I could rest for an hour or so? He asked Tiana, who had been discreetly ensuring his coffee stayed filled. Yes, sir. We have private rest pods in the wellness area. They're equipped with reclining beds and sound-dampening technology. Very comfortable for a nap. The rest pod was indeed impressive. A sleek, capsule-like space with a memory foam mattress and adjustable lighting. Malcolm had been struggling with insomnia lately due to pre-merger stress, and his doctor had prescribed a mild sleep aid. He took one pill, set an alarm for 90 minutes, and quickly drifted off into a deep sleep. What he didn't know was that Bradley and Ryan had been watching him, waiting for this moment. As the medication pulled him under, Malcolm was completely unaware that the worst violation of his life was about to occur. Malcolm drifted in the hazy realm between sleep and consciousness, vaguely aware of sounds around him. Muffled laughter whispers a mechanical buzzing that pulsed through the fog of his medication-induced slumber. The sleep aid his doctor had prescribed was working perhaps too well, leaving him disoriented and unable to fully process what was happening. "Dude, hurry up before someone comes," a voice whispered urgently. It sounded familiar, Ryan Malcolm's mind sluggishly supplied. "Relax, I told Jen to keep Tiana busy at the front desk." Another voice, Bradley's, replied with smug confidence. "Besides, he's totally out of it. Look at him." The buzzing sound grew louder, closer to Malcolm's ear. Something tugged at his scalp, followed by more snickering. Malcolm tried to open his eyes to move to speak, but his limbs felt weighted down, his tongue thick and uncooperative. "Man, this is gonna look so good on Instagram," Ryan whispered. "CEO my ass. We're giving the rapper a proper haircut for his big meeting." "Corporate makeover," Bradley added, triggering another round of stifled laughter. "Hold his head still while I get this part." Malcolm finally managed to crack his eyelids open, the world swimming into a blurry focus. The sight that greeted him sent ice through his veins, despite his drugged state. Bradley stood over him, an electric razor in one hand, while Ryan held his phone up, recording the entire scene. Around them on the floor lay clumps of Malcolm's hair, the precise professional cut he'd maintained for years now, reduced to scattered patches on the premium carpet of the SkySoar lounge. "Wah, stop." Malcolm slurred, trying to raise his hand to protect what remained of his hair. The movement was slow, uncoordinated, his fine motor control compromised by the medication. "Oh look, Sleeping Beauty's awake," Bradley mocked, not stopping his assault with the razor. "Don't worry, big shot. We're almost done with your new executive style." Malcolm struggled to sit up, his mind clearing slightly with the surge of adrenaline. "Stop this." Now he managed each word, a battle against his uncooperative tongue. Or what Ryan taunted, still filming. "You'll call your homeboys to come rough us up. This is just a joke, man. Can't you take a joke?" The door to the rest area burst open, light flooding in from the corridor. Tiana stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes widening in horror as she took in the scene. "What are you doing?" she gasped, rushing forward to snatch the razor from Bradley's hand. "Have you completely lost your minds?" "Relax, Tiana," Bradley said dismissively, rolling his eyes. "We're just having some fun with our VIP guest. He fell asleep in a public area, fair game." "This is assault," Tiana said firmly, her voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "This is a hate crime. This is nothing," Ryan interrupted, finally lowering his phone. "Just a little harmless prank between friends. Right, Malcolm?" He emphasized the first name with deliberate disrespect. Malcolm was more alert now, the shocking situation burning through the fog of medication. He carefully touched his head, feeling the uneven patches, the rough stubble in some areas contrasting with the sections of his normal, short, professionally groomed hair in others. The deliberate destruction of his appearance before the most important meeting of his career wasn't just humiliating. It was a calculated act designed to strip him of his dignity, his professionalism, his carefully constructed armor. Against a world that already judged him more harshly than his white counterparts. "You've recorded this," Malcolm stated flatly. His speech still slightly slurred, but clearer now as he looked at Ryan's phone. "Just for our personal collection," Bradley smirked. Though I bet your board members would get a kick out of seeing their CEO getting a little makeover before the big meeting. Tiana had helped Malcolm to a sitting position and now stood protectively beside him. I'm calling security and reporting this to management. Immediately, she declared, pulling out her company phone. For what? A haircut? Bradley scoffed. Come on, Tiana, don't be so dramatic. You know how these things work. Who do you think management is going to believe, 2 senior crew members with spotless records or the diversity hire who's always complaining about something? The threat was clear, but Tiana's resolve didn't waver. I believe in documentation, she said coldly, using her personal phone to take pictures of the scene, the discarded hair, the razor, Malcolm's damaged appearance. And I believe in doing what's right, regardless of the consequences. Malcolm was now standing, albeit unsteadily. His medication was wearing off, but the disorientation lingered. He caught sight of himself in the mirrored wall of the rest area and felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with the sleep aid. The damage was even worse than he'd imagined. Crude, jagged patches cut to the scalp in some areas, leaving him looking nothing like the polished CEO who had entered the lounge hours earlier. I need to call my assistant, he said quietly, his voice controlled despite the rage and humiliation coursing through him. Oh no, did we mess up your fancy meeting? Ryan mocked. Maybe wear a hat or a do-rag. Isn't that what you people usually? That's enough, Tiana interrupted, her voice cutting through Ryan's taunts. Mr. Washington, let me escort you to the customer service office. We need to report this officially. As they exited the rest area, Malcolm became aware of the stares from other lounge guests. Conversations hushed as he passed. A woman gasped audibly. A businessman quickly averted his eyes, clearly uncomfortable. Most disturbingly, several people had their phones raised, recording his humiliation for posterity and potentially social media. Malcolm Washington had built his career facing down racism, overcoming obstacles, proving himself again and again in rooms where he was the only black face. He had endured subtle slights, coded language, and systemic barriers with unwavering dignity. But as he walked through that lounge, the physical evidence of his degradation on display for all to see, he felt something break inside him. Not his resolve, but any illusion that his success, his wealth, his achievements could ever fully shield him from the reality of being black in America. Behind him, Bradley called out with mock concern, "Don't forget your complimentary SkySoar grooming kit, Mr. CEO." The laughter that followed would cost SkySoar Airlines far more than anyone in that lounge could possibly imagine. The customer service office of SkySoar Airlines was a stark contrast to the premium lounge fluorescent lighting, replacing warm ambiance laminate desks instead of marble surfaces, and a distinct lack of the luxury that premium members paid thousands to experience. Malcolm Washington sat rigidly in an uncomfortable plastic chair, his hand occasionally, unconsciously reaching up to touch the devastation that had once been his meticulously maintained haircut. Scott Wilson, the on-duty customer service manager, looked visibly uncomfortable as he shifted papers around his desk. A middle-aged white man with a receding hairline and a SkySoar pin that indicated 15 years of service, Scott seemed entirely unprepared for the situation unfolding before him. So, Mr. Washington, I understand there was some unprofessional behavior from our staff. Scott began, deliberately avoiding looking at Malcolm's head. Unprofessional behavior, Malcolm repeated, his voice dangerously calm. Your staff drugged me. Now, Sir Scott, interrupted, our report indicates you took medication voluntarily. Your staff took advantage of my sedated state to assault me, humiliate me, and film the entire incident while making racist comments, Malcolm continued as if Scott hadn't spoken. They destroyed my appearance hours before the most important business meeting of my career, and they threatened Miss Robinson when she intervened. Tiana Robinson, who had insisted on staying with Malcolm as a witness, nodded firmly. I have documentation, she added. Photos of the scene and the aftermath. Scott cleared his throat nervously. Well, these are very serious allegations. We'll certainly need to investigate. There is nothing to investigate, Malcolm said, each word precisely enunciated. The evidence is literally on my head. The evidence is in the videos your staff and other passengers took. The evidence is in the clumps of my hair still on the floor of your lounge. Mr. Washington, I completely understand you're upset. No, Mr. Wilson, I don't think you do understand, Malcolm interrupted, leaning forward slightly. I don't think you understand what it means for a black man to have his appearance forcibly altered as a joke. I don't think you understand the historical context of violating a black person's body and hair for white entertainment. And I certainly don't think you understand the legal and financial repercussions that are about to rain down on SkySoar Airlines. Scott Wilson's face paled. For the first time, he seemed to realize that the man sitting across from him wasn't just any angry passenger, but someone with the resources and determination to follow through on his implied threat. Sir SkySoar deeply regrets any negative experience you've had with us today. Scott recited, falling back on corporate script. As a goodwill gesture, we'd be happy to offer you compensation miles and an upgrade to first class on your rescheduled flight. Malcolm's laugh was hollow, devoid of humor. Compensation miles. For a hate crime committed by your employees. For an assault recorded and potentially distributed without my consent. For the deliberate sabotage of my professional appearance before a billion-dollar merger meeting. Scott swallowed hard. Perhaps we should involve our legal department. An excellent suggestion, Malcolm agreed coldly. He pulled out his phone, which had been buzzing continuously for the past 30 minutes. But you should know that my team is already involved. Indeed, Malcolm's phone screen showed a flurry of texts and missed calls from his assistant Grace, his attorney Amara Jackson, and various members of his executive team. While Scott had been fumbling through customer service platitudes, Malcolm had been methodically documenting everything, sending photos to Grace, recording audio of his conversation with Scott, and composing a detailed account of the incident. While it was still fresh in his mind, medication fog notwithstanding. I need to make some calls, Malcolm stated, rising from his chair. Miss Robinson, would you be willing to provide your contact information? My legal team will want to speak with you. Tiana didn't hesitate. Absolutely, Mr. Washington. She wrote her personal number and email on a piece of paper. I'm scheduled to work the flight to San Francisco, but I'll be available after that. What they did was wrong, and I won't stay silent about it. Scott Wilson looked increasingly alarmed. Miss Robinson, I'd remind you of our confidentiality policies. And I'd remind you of whistleblower protection laws and my rights as a witness to a potential hate crime, Tiana replied evenly. I've worked for SkySoar for 5 years, Mr. Wilson. In that time, I've filed 7 reports about Bradley Parker's behavior toward passengers of color. 7 reports that mysteriously disappeared from the system. This stops now. Malcolm stepped into the hallway to call Grace, giving her a succinct overview of the situation. Her gasp of horror was audible even to Tiana, who stood respectfully at a distance. Cancel my hotel and book me on another airline, any airline but SkySoar, Malcolm instructed, and connect me with Amara immediately. When he hung up, Malcolm made a decision that surprised even himself. I still need to get to San Francisco for that meeting, he told Tiana. I'm going to take the SkySoar flight. Are you sure? Mr. Washington, Tiana asked, concern evident in her voice. After what happened, I refuse to let them derail this merger, Malcolm said firmly. I've worked too hard for too long. Bradley and Ryan wanted to humiliate me, to make me hide, to reinforce that I don't belong in the rooms I've earned my way into. I won't give them that satisfaction. Scott Wilson, who had followed them into the hallway, looked simultaneously relieved and terrified. So, you'll be continuing your journey with us today. That's good to hear, Mr. Washington. Malcolm fixed him with a level stare. "Don't mistake my decision to keep my business commitments for forgiveness, Mr. Wilson. This incident isn't over. It's just beginning." As Malcolm made his way to the gate, he was acutely aware of the stares, the whispers, the phones that discreetly rose to capture images of his ruined appearance. With each step, he maintained the straight posture and confident gait that had become second nature even as he felt naked without the physical presentation he'd so carefully maintained throughout his career. On the aircraft, the first-class flight attendant did a double take as he presented his boarding pass. Malcolm took his seat by the window, immediately opening his laptop to continue preparing for the meeting, acting as if nothing was amiss. Inside, however, his mind was racing, cycling between shock, rage, humiliation, and a cold, calculated determination to ensure that what happened to him would have consequences. What Malcolm didn't yet realize was that while he'd been in Scott Wilson's office, one of the lounge guests had already uploaded a short clip of the aftermath to Twitter with the caption, "SkySoar Airlines staff shaved a black man's head as a joke while he slept in their premium lounge. Disgusting. Number SkySoar racism. Number boycott SkySoar." The video was spreading like wildfire, gaining thousands of retweets by the minute. By the time Malcolm's plane took off, major news outlets had picked up the story, and SkySoar's social media team was in full crisis mode. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and had to decide whether to speak up? Comment 1 if you would have spoken up like Tiana did, even at risk to your job. Hit the like button if you believe companies should be held accountable for the actions of their employees. Subscribe to follow Malcolm's journey toward justice in this shocking true story. What do you think Malcolm will do next? Will he pursue legal action against the airline or try to handle the situation privately? The corporate response in our next section might surprise you. The 5-hour flight from Atlanta to San Francisco gave Malcolm Washington time to process, plan, and prepare. With spotty in-flight Wi-Fi, he remained mostly unaware of the social media firestorm that had erupted around the incident. Tiana Robinson, working in the main cabin, had discreetly checked on him twice during the flight, providing updates that SkySoar's corporate office had been notified and an investigation was supposedly underway. As the aircraft began its descent into San Francisco International Airport, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've just been informed that there will be some media presence at the gate upon our arrival. This is unrelated to our flight operations, and we ask that you proceed normally to your destinations. As always, we thank you for choosing SkySoar Airlines." Malcolm closed his eyes briefly. Media presence could only mean one thing: the incident had gone public. He sent a quick text to Grace Landing soon. "Need a car at arrival. Bring a cap or hat if possible." When the plane reached the gate and the seatbelt sign turned off, Tiana appeared at his seat. "Mr. Washington," she said quietly, "there are reporters in the terminal. Security can escort you through a staff entrance if you prefer." "Thank you, Tiana, but no," Malcolm replied, standing to retrieve his carry-on. "I won't sneak out the back door as if I've done something wrong." As he stepped into the terminal, the flashbulbs began immediately. Reporters surged forward, held back only by airport security personnel forming a loose perimeter. Microphones extended toward him as questions flew from all directions. "Mr. Washington, can you comment on the assault at SkySoar's premium lounge? Did you know the employees who attacked you? Will you be pressing charges against SkySoar? How do you respond to SkySoar's statement that this was just horseplay that got out of hand?" That last question caught Malcolm's attention. Horseplay. As he scanned the crowd, he spotted Grace pushing through with a security guard. She wore a grim expression and carried a sleek black baseball cap with the Nexus Innovations logo. "No comments at this time," Malcolm stated firmly to the reporters. "I have business to attend to." Grace reached his side, handing him the cap. "Car's outside. Jeff is driving. She lowered her voice. It's bad, Malcolm. Their PR team is in full spin mode. Once safely in the back of the black SUV, Malcolm finally had a moment to assess the situation. Tell me everything, he instructed Grace as the car pulled away from the curb. Grace handed him her tablet. The video went viral about an hour after it happened. Major news networks picked it up within 2 hours. SkySoar's CEO Gregory Peterson issued a statement about 3 hours ago. Malcolm watched the clip of Peterson, a silver-haired white man in his 60s, standing at a podium with the SkySoar logo behind him. His expression was serious, but not apologetic. SkySoar Airlines is aware of an incident that occurred in our Atlanta Premium Lounge this morning involving passenger Malcolm Washington and 2 of our crew members. While we do not condone unprofessional behavior, initial reports indicate this was a case of miscommunication and horseplay that regrettably got out of hand. The crew members in question have been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. We are in contact with Mr. Washington to resolve this matter appropriately. Malcolm's jaw tightened. Horseplay miscommunication. They're trying to minimize a racist assault as some kind of friendly prank. It gets worse, Grace said grimly, swiping to another screen. They're quietly pushing a narrative questioning your account. Some aviation blog is suggesting you were intoxicated and behaving inappropriately toward female staff, and that Bradley and Ryan were responding to complaints. That's an outright lie, Malcolm said, his voice dangerously quiet. Tiana Robinson was there. She witnessed everything. They're already working to discredit her too, suggesting she has a history of sensitivity about racial issues, Grace reported. But the public isn't buying it. Number boycott SkySoar is trending nationwide. Your industry peers are speaking out. The NAACP and other civil rights organizations have issued statements of support. Malcolm nodded slowly, processing this information. Has Amara called? Every 15 minutes. She's assembling a legal team as we speak. She wants to file both criminal charges against Bradley and Ryan and a civil suit against SkySoar for negligent hiring, hostile environment, assault battery, emotional distress, and about 10 other causes of action she rattled off too quickly for me to note. As they pulled up to the Four Seasons where Malcolm's merger meeting would take place the following morning, his phone rang. The screen showed Horizon Technologies CEO Victor Chen calling. Victor Malcolm answered, his voice steady despite everything. Good to hear from you. Malcolm Victor's concerned voice came through. I've just seen the news. Are you all right? Do we need to postpone tomorrow's meeting? Malcolm took a deep breath. I appreciate your concern, Victor, but no. This merger is too important for both our companies. I'll be there tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp as planned. Respect, Malcolm. Not many could maintain that professionalism after what you've experienced, Victor said. For what it's worth, I've already instructed our travel department that Horizon employees will no longer fly SkySoar under any circumstances. Their response has been disgraceful. After checking into the hotel, Malcolm finally connected with Amara Jackson, his longtime attorney and friend from their MIT days. Her face on the video call was a portrait of controlled fury. I've been building this case for the past 5 hours, she began without preamble. Their response gives us even more ammunition. Horseplay miscommunication. They're digging themselves deeper with every statement. What are we looking at legally speaking? Malcolm asked. Multiple fronts. Amara replied, all business now. Criminal charges against Bradley Parker and Ryan Cooper for assault, battery, and potentially hate crime enhancements given the racial comments captured in the background of the videos. Videos plural. Malcolm questioned. At least 3 different angles have surfaced online from other passengers. Amara confirmed. One clearly captures Ryan saying the rapper comment, and Bradley making remarks about teaching you people about appropriate corporate appearance. Against SkySoar, we're looking at negligent hiring and supervision, hostile environment. vicarious liability for their employees' actions, emotional distress, and potentially violations of federal civil rights statutes. And their attempt to spin this adds defamation to the list, Amara said grimly. They're implying you were intoxicated and harassing female staff. We have the medical record showing your prescribed sleep medication, and I'm already in contact with Tiana Robinson, who's willing to testify about what really happened. Malcolm was quiet for a moment. What about Bradley Parker's history? Tiana mentioned filing multiple reports about his behavior that disappeared. Amara's expression turned predatory. That's where this gets interesting. I've had my team digging since this broke. Bradley Parker has a pattern of similar incidents with passengers of color. 3 complaints in Chicago, 2 in Dallas, 1 in Denver, all mysteriously resolved with confidential settlements and NDAs. And guess who personally approved those settlements? Gregory Peterson Malcolm stated, rather than asked. Before he was CEO, he was chief of operations. Every complaint about Bradley Parker crossed his desk, and everyone vanished with minimal consequences. We're going to argue that SkySoar knowingly kept a racist employee in a customer-facing role despite documented incidents. As they continued to strategize, Malcolm's phone buzzed with a news alert. Gregory Peterson was holding another press conference. They paused to watch. Peterson's tone had shifted slightly, but his message remained defensive. SkySoar Airlines prides itself on diversity and inclusion. The incident involving Mr. Washington is regrettable, but we believe it has been mischaracterized on social media. Our investigation suggests that Mr. Washington may have been disoriented due to medication and potentially misconstrued friendly banter as something more sinister. We hope to resolve this matter privately and professionally. Unbelievable, Amara breathed. They're actually doubling down and victim blaming. Malcolm, we need to respond. Malcolm shook his head. Not yet. Let them keep digging. I have the merger meeting tomorrow morning, and nothing, not even this, will derail that achievement. Are you sure you want to go through with the meeting looking like someone attacked me? Yes, Malcolm said firmly. I won't hide what happened to me. I won't be ashamed of what was done to me. The board members of both companies need to see exactly what racism in corporate America looks like when it drops its polite mask. The next morning, Malcolm Washington walked into the Horizon Technologies boardroom without a hat, without attempting to hide the damage to his hair. The shocked expressions of the board members spoke volumes, but Malcolm conducted himself with the same brilliant professionalism that had built Nexus Innovations from the ground up. 3 hours later, he emerged with signed merger documents. Nexus Horizon would become the 3rd largest logistics technology company in the world, with Malcolm Washington as CEO of the combined entity. As he left the meeting, his phone vibrated with an incoming call from an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. Mr. Washington, Gregory Peterson's voice came through artificially warm. I was hoping we could discuss a resolution to this unfortunate situation. SkySoar is prepared to offer a very generous settlement to put this matter behind us. Malcolm's laugh was genuine for the first time in 24 hours. Mr. Peterson, your airline hasn't seen turbulence yet, he replied before hanging up. What he didn't tell Peterson was that while he'd been securing the merger, Amara had been meeting with former SkySoar employees who had reached out after seeing the news. Employees with stories about discrimination, with copies of emails revealing the company's systematic burial of complaints, with evidence that would turn this incident from a PR nightmare into an existential threat to SkySoar's very existence. The storm was just beginning to gather. SkySoar Airlines faces backlash over alleged assault on black CEO, read the CNN Chiron as footage of Malcolm leaving the San Francisco airport played on screens across America. The story had transcended social media to become the leading headline on every major news network. The video clip showing Malcolm's devastated appearance, juxtaposed with his dignified bearing, had struck a nerve with the public, in a way that statistics about discrimination rarely could. In the 48 hours since the incident, the hashtag number boycott SkySoar had been used over 15 million times. SkySoar's stock had already dropped 17%, wiping out nearly $1.2 billion in market capitalization. The airline's customer service lines were jammed with passengers demanding refunds for upcoming flights. But it wasn't just anonymous social media users driving the outrage. High-profile figures were taking public stands. Basketball superstar DeAndre Williams posted a video announcement, "I've been a SkySoar Platinum member for 8 years. Today I cut up my card. What happened to Malcolm Washington could have happened to me, my father, my son. I won't spend another dollar with a company that allows this kind of behavior." Grammy-winning artist Leanna James canceled her appearance in SkySoar's upcoming advertising campaign with a scathing statement. As a Black woman who has experienced discrimination in supposedly exclusive spaces, cannot in good conscience partner with a company that permits and then defends racist assault. SkySoar doesn't deserve the culture they're so eager to profit from. Even corporations were distancing themselves. Tech giant Apex announced they would no longer use SkySoar for corporate travel, with CEO Rajiv Mehta stating, "What happened to Malcolm Washington represents the antithesis of the inclusive business environment we strive to create." Until SkySoar demonstrates meaningful accountability and change, Apex will use other carriers. The outrage wasn't limited to statements. Protests had formed at major airports where SkySoar operated, with demonstrators carrying signs reading "Cut SkySoar, not black hair, and racism shouldn't fly." At Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, where the incident occurred, over 500 protesters blocked access to SkySoar's check-in counters, forcing the airline to rebook passengers on other carriers. In his hotel suite in San Francisco, Malcolm watched the coverage with a mixture of vindication and weariness. He had spent the day in back-to-back interviews with carefully selected journalists, those with reputations for thorough reporting rather than sensationalism. His calm, measured recounting of events delivered without embellishment or emotional appeals made the story all the more powerful. "I'm not asking for sympathy," he told PBS NewsHour's Judy Woodruff. "I'm asking for accountability. What happened to me wasn't an isolated incident or a misunderstanding. It was the logical conclusion of a corporate culture that views Black customers as inherently less valuable, less deserving of respect, less human." Malcolm's executive team had flown in to manage both the merger transition and the crisis. Grace had transformed his suite into a command center, coordinating with Amara's legal team and fielding the overwhelming media requests. The room buzzed with activity as Malcolm prepared for his most significant interview, yet a live segment on 60 Minutes that would air that evening. "You don't have to do this, you know," Grace said quietly, handing him a freshly pressed shirt. "No one would blame you for taking time away from the spotlight." Malcolm shook his head. "If I don't speak now, SkySoar's PR machine will control the narrative. Besides," he added with a grim smile, "Grandma Eloise would never forgive me for missing this teaching moment." As if summoned by his words, his phone rang with his grandmother's familiar ringtone. Malcolm stepped into the bedroom to take the call privately. Malcolm James Washington Eloise's voice was stern despite her 90 years. "Why am I finding out from the Today Show that someone put their hands on my grandson?" "I didn't want to worry you, Grandma," Malcolm replied, his voice softening as it always did with her. "Worry me, child. I was marching for our rights before you were born. I've seen worse than this." Her tone gentled, "But I've never been prouder of how you're handling it. Standing tall, speaking truth, not letting them see you broken." "I learned from the best," Malcolm said, emotion threatening his composure for the first time since the incident. "Your grandfather would say the same thing he always did. Don't get mad, get everything." Her chuckle held 9 decades of resilience. "Now what's the plan?" Meanwhile, at SkySoar's corporate headquarters in Dallas, panic had set in. Emergency board meetings ran through the night as executives struggled to contain the damage. Gregory Peterson paced the conference room, his usual confidence shattered by the latest projections. 22% of our bookings canceled in the last 24 hours, the CFO reported grimly. Corporate accounts are dropping us daily. The European Union is considering a formal inquiry into our diversity practices, which could affect our international routes. It's one incident, Peterson exploded. One passenger, 2 employees who've been fired. Why won't this die down? Marissa Chen, the newly hired chief diversity officer who had been on the job for all of 3 weeks, spoke up because it's not one incident and the public knows it. Former employees are coming forward with similar stories. Number Black Sky Soar Stories is trending with thousands of first-hand accounts of discrimination from our passengers. And your response, frankly, has made everything worse. Watch your tone, Peterson warned. You were hired to fix our image, not criticize leadership. I was hired to help create actual diversity and inclusion, not to be a PR shield, Marissa replied coolly. And unless you're ready to make real changes, starting with your own accountability, there won't be an airline left to diversify. The tension was interrupted by Peterson's assistant rushing in. Sir, you need to see this. Bradley Parker just gave an interview to TMZ. The room fell silent as they pulled up the video. Bradley, looking disheveled and defensive, stood outside what appeared to be a bar. Look, it was just a joke that went too far, he slurred slightly. Washington was acting all high and mighty, flashing his expensive watch, dropping hints about being some big CEO. We just wanted to take him down a peg, show him he's not better than everyone else just because he has money now. So you admit you targeted him because he's a successful black man, the interviewer pressed. Bradley's expression darkened. I didn't say anything about race. You people always make everything about race. If he can't take a joke, that's his problem, not mine. Were there other incidents where you joked with passengers of color? Bradley's face flushed. No comment. SkySoar told me not to say anything else. He pushed past the camera, but not before adding, Peterson knows how we handle difficult passengers. Management's always had our backs before. The boardroom erupted into chaos. He just implicated you, Greg, the legal counsel said, ashen-faced. This is no longer containable. Back in San Francisco, Amara burst into Malcolm's suite, laptop in hand. You need to see this now, she said, playing the TMZ clip. Bradley Parker just handed us the case on a silver platter. Malcolm watched silently, his expression unchanging. When it finished, he simply asked, What about Ryan Cooper? Rolled over completely, Amara replied with satisfaction. He's agreed to testify against both Bradley and SkySoar in exchange for reduced charges. Says Bradley has done this at least 7 other times that he knows of, always with passengers of color, always with management covering it up afterward. And Tiana. She's been placed on administrative leave since speaking to us, but she's standing firm. More importantly, she kept copies of every discrimination report she filed about Bradley that mysteriously disappeared from the system. She has dates, details, names of the passengers involved. Malcolm Amara's voice took on an edge of excitement. This isn't just a case anymore. This is a movement. Indeed, the incident had catalyzed a broader conversation. Major publications ran features examining discrimination in the airline industry. The hashtag number #FlyinWhileBlack collected thousands of similar stories. Civil rights organizations announced a joint investigation into practices across all major carriers. What had begun as one horrific experience for Malcolm Washington had exposed a systemic issue that could no longer be ignored or dismissed. As Malcolm prepared for his 60 Minutes interview, he reviewed notes from conversations with other black executives who had reached out with their own stories, different in details, but identical in essence. I'm not just speaking for myself tonight, he told Grace. as a producer attached his microphone. "I'm speaking for everyone who's ever had to be twice as good to get half as much, everyone who's been told to take racism as a joke, everyone who's been made to feel they don't belong in spaces. They've earned the right to occupy." The interview would be watched by 27 million Americans. By morning, SkySoar's stock would fall another 29%, and Gregory Peterson would receive a call from the board of directors that would end his career. But what no one yet realized, not Malcolm, not Amara, not the protesters or commentators or social media users, was that the most damning evidence against SkySoar Airlines was still to come. The modest office of Jackson Legal Group belied the power it wielded in civil rights litigation. Located in a converted warehouse in Oakland, the space was functional rather than flashy. Amara Jackson had always preferred to let her results speak for themselves. Today, the conference room hummed with focused energy as her expanded team of attorneys, paralegals, and investigators methodically built what was becoming the most high-profile discrimination case of the decade. "Bradley Parker's employment history is a roadmap of red flags," said Marcus Reynolds, Amara's lead investigator, as he pinned another document to the evidence board that now covered an entire wall. Complaints at 3 different airlines before SkySoar all settled quietly. Then at SkySoar, 7 formal complaints that we know of all mysteriously resolved with no disciplinary action. "How does someone with that record keep getting promoted?" asked Zoe Chen, the newest associate on Amara's team. "That's where it gets interesting," Marcus replied, tapping a photograph of Gregory Peterson. 4 years ago, when Peterson was chief of operations, he personally intervened in a particularly serious complaint against Parker. A black neurosurgeon from Johns Hopkins alleged that Parker had repeatedly referred to him as boy during a flight and questioned the authenticity of his first-class ticket. "Let me guess," Amara said from the doorway, coffee in hand. "Confidential settlement with an NDA." "Better," Marcus smiled grimly. Peterson quashed it completely. Told HR that the passenger was combative and Parker was following protocol. But here's the kicker. We found emails showing Peterson and Parker were fraternity brothers at Texas State. Peterson has been protecting him for years. Amara nodded, processing this information. That connection gives us motive for the corporate cover-up. What about Ryan Cooper? Nervous wreck, reported Tanya Washington, the team's witness coordinator. He's terrified of jail time and practically falling over himself to cooperate. Says Bradley boasted about having friends in high places who would always have his back. Ryan claims he was just following Bradley's lead. "A modern just following orders defense," Amara muttered. "Not particularly compelling, but his testimony against Bradley and the corporate culture is invaluable." "What about Tiana Robinson?" "Extraordinary witness," Tanya said with genuine admiration. "Poised, articulate, and meticulously documented everything. Since reporting the incident, she's been placed on indefinite administrative leave, effectively suspended without actually firing her, which would trigger legal protections. Classic retaliation tactic," Amara noted. "Add that to the lawsuit." The conference room door opened as Malcolm Washington entered, accompanied by Grace. Despite the continuing media frenzy, Malcolm had insisted on being directly involved in building the case. His 60 Minutes interview had been watched by millions and widely praised for its dignity and restraint, further enhancing public support. Malcolm Amara greeted him. "Just in time. We were discussing the mounting evidence of systemic discrimination at SkySoar." "I've been hearing from others," Malcolm said, setting down his briefcase. "Since the interview aired, I've received hundreds of messages from black passengers with similar experiences on SkySoar flights. Not just hair-touching or slurs, but consistent patterns of being challenged about their ticket class, being seated away from first class, despite having paid for it, being subjected to excessive security checks. We've started a database," Grace added, opening her laptop, "categorized by type of incident, date, flight route, and staff involved. There are definite patterns emerging. particularly on routes from Atlanta, Chicago, and Dallas, all hubs where Bradley Parker frequently worked. Amara studied the data, her expression hardening. This gives us grounds for a class action. It's no longer just about what happened to you, Malcolm. It's about an entrenched culture of discrimination that SkySoar fostered and protected. That's exactly why I'm here, Malcolm replied. I received an interesting call this morning from someone named Diane Mercer. SkySoar's former head of human resources, Marcus asked, eyebrows raised. She left abruptly about 8 months ago. No explanation given. She wants to meet, Malcolm said. Says she has information that will blow the case wide open, but she'll only talk to me directly, not through lawyers. Amara frowned. Could be a trap. SkySoar might be using her to get information about our strategy, or to catch you saying something they can use against you. I considered that, Malcolm acknowledged. But Diane Mercer is the one who hired Tiana Robinson as part of a diversity initiative that Peterson reportedly undermined. If anyone knows where the bodies are buried, it would be the former head of HR. If you're determined to meet her, at least let me set up some precautions, Amara insisted. Neutral location recording devices, a witness present but not directly involved. Later that afternoon, Malcolm sat in a private dining room at a discreet San Francisco restaurant, Grace positioned at a table near the entrance, ostensibly working on her laptop but actually monitoring the situation. Malcolm had agreed to Amara's conditions, including wearing a discreet recording device. Diane Mercer arrived precisely on time. A tall, elegant woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and the alert eyes of someone who missed nothing. She declined Malcolm's offer of lunch, asking instead for tea. Mr. Washington, she began. Once the server had left them alone, I want to be clear that what I'm about to share with you puts me at significant professional risk. I signed multiple NDAs when I left SkySoar. Then why take the risk? Malcolm asked directly. Diane's composed expression flickered briefly. Because what happened to you was the culmination of a toxic culture I tried and failed to change. When I saw that video, I knew I couldn't remain silent anymore. She opened her bag and removed a flash drive. This contains 3 years of HR documentation that never made it into the official records. Employee complaints about discrimination that were directed to be handled informally. Emails from Gregory Peterson instructing me to manage situations without creating paper trails. Performance reviews of minority employees that were altered to justify passing them over for promotion. Malcolm looked at the flash drive, understanding its significance. You kept copies. I kept copies, Diane confirmed. I knew someday they might be needed. There's more. She leaned forward slightly. SkySoar has a separate settlement system for discrimination complaints. They're processed through a shell company called Azure Resolutions to keep them off the airline's books and away from shareholder scrutiny. In the last 5 years, they've paid out over $47 million in confidential settlements for incidents similar to yours, all while publicly claiming their commitment to diversity and inclusion. Malcolm absorbed this information, his expression unchanged, though his mind raced with implications. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Would you have believed me without experiencing it yourself? Diane asked simply. Would the media have cared about a disgruntled ex-employee with documents that could have been fabricated, but now with your case and your platform? She trailed off, then added quietly, I was a coward. I told myself I was making changes from within. But when Peterson became CEO and systematically dismantled my diversity initiatives, I should have spoken up. Instead, I took the severance package and the NDAs. Malcolm studied her for a long moment. What do you want in return for this information? Nothing, Diane replied firmly. Use it however you see fit. I'll testify if needed. NDA consequences be damned. Just promise me one thing when this is over. When SkySoar has been held accountable, use your influence to ensure that whoever takes over actually implements real change. The thousands of good people who work there deserve better leadership. After Diane left, Grace joined Malcolm at the table, her expression incredulous. Did she just hand us everything we need? If those documents are authenticated, yes, Malcolm replied, carefully pocketing the flash drive. Call Amara. We need to verify this immediately. Back at Amara's office, the team worked through the night, analyzing Diane Mercer's files. By morning, they had confirmed their authenticity through digital timestamps, metadata, and cross-referencing with information they already possessed. It's the smoking gun, Amara declared, eyes bright, with the thrill of justice within reach. The Azure Resolutions connection proves intentional concealment of systemic discrimination. The altered performance reviews demonstrate a pattern of holding minority employees to different standards, and the emails from Peterson. Malcolm, he explicitly refers to maintaining the airline's traditional image by keeping certain routes and premium services comfortable for our core demographic. Corporate speak for, keep it white, Malcolm translated grimly. Exactly. This isn't just negligence or a few bad employees, it's a deliberate strategy from the top down. Amara's phone buzzed with a news alert. Speaking of Peterson, he's holding another press conference in an hour. They watched as Gregory Peterson, looking significantly less polished than in previous appearances, stood before the media. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usual confident posture had given way to a defensive stiffness. SkySoar Airlines acknowledges that the incident involving Malcolm Washington was completely unacceptable. Peterson began reading from prepared notes. The employees involved have been terminated, and we are conducting a thorough review of our training procedures. We have attempted to reach out to Mr. Washington to offer a private apology and appropriate compensation, but unfortunately, he appears more interested in pursuing legal action than resolution. Malcolm's phone rang. It was Tiana Robinson. Mr. Washington, are you watching this? He's lying again. They haven't fired Bradley, they've suspended him with pay. And they just offered me a promotion if I'll sign a statement saying I never witnessed systemic discrimination at SkySoar. Let me guess, contingent on an NDA, Malcolm asked. Exactly. When I refused, the VP of Operations suggested I consider my future in the industry carefully. Malcolm thanked her for the information and relayed it to Amara, who was already drafting a response to Peterson's statement. But before she could finish, breaking news interrupted. The Federal Aviation Administration and the Department of Transportation had announced a joint investigation into SkySoar Airlines practices. This just became bigger than our lawsuit, Amara realized. The federal investigation can access records even we can't subpoena. The next 48 hours saw a flurry of developments. 3 more former SkySoar executives came forward with corroborating accounts of discriminatory practices. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission announced its own investigation into the company's hiring and promotion policies. And most dramatically, a group of SkySoar's institutional investors filed a shareholder lawsuit against Peterson and the board for breach of fiduciary duty by concealing liabilities related to discrimination settlements. Malcolm, meanwhile, had been receiving disturbing messages, anonymous emails with racial slurs, social media comments suggesting he had provoked the assault or was playing the race card for financial gain. A particularly unsettling letter had been delivered to his hotel, containing nothing but a photo of him with his eyes gouged out. "We need to take these threats seriously," Grace insisted after finding the letter. "I've already arranged for additional security."
"I won't be intimidated,"
Malcolm stated firmly, though he agreed to the security measures for the sake of his team. The investigation took an unexpected turn when the FAA's probe uncovered something no one had anticipated: evidence that SkySoar had been cutting corners on safety protocols to reduce costs, particularly on flights serving predominantly Black and Latino communities. Maintenance schedules had been extended beyond recommended limits, required safety checks, abbreviated and in some cases documented problems had been deferred indefinitely. They weren't just discriminating against passengers and employees, Amara said, reviewing the preliminary findings. They were literally providing less safe aircraft based on the racial demographics of the routes. This isn't just a civil rights case anymore, it's potentially criminal negligence. As federal investigators descended on SkySoar's headquarters with subpoenas, as protesters continued to gather at airports nationwide, as the company's stock plummeted to historic lows, Malcolm Washington prepared for the most important decision of his career. The legal case was solid, the evidence overwhelming the public firmly on his side. But the outcome he truly wanted, fundamental change in how corporations viewed and treated black customers and employees, required more than just a favorable verdict. It required a complete dismantling and rebuilding of a toxic system. And Malcolm was beginning to see a path to make that happen. One that went far beyond monetary damages, or even criminal charges against those responsible. What he didn't know was that Gregory Peterson had reached the same conclusion, albeit from a very different perspective, and was preparing a desperate final move to save what remained of his career and the airline he had helped destroy. The headquarters of SkySoar Airlines had once been a showcase of corporate success, a gleaming 40-story tower in downtown Dallas, with the company's distinctive blue and silver logo illuminated at its crown. Now at 5:30 a.m. on a gloomy Tuesday, it resembled a fortress under siege. News vans clogged the surrounding streets. Protesters had maintained a constant presence for over 2 weeks, and private security guards had replaced the friendly receptionists who once greeted visitors. On the 40th floor, the executive suite had transformed into what staffers were calling the bunker. Gregory Peterson had barely left the building in days, sleeping on the leather couch in his office and subsisting on catered meals while attempting to salvage what remained of the airline and his career. "Sir, you have a 6 a.m. call with the board." His assistant reminded him, placing a fresh shirt and tie on the chair. The assistant's eyes betrayed what everyone in the building knew. These might be the final hours of SkySoar Airlines as an independent company. Peterson nodded grimly, studying the morning's catastrophic financial reports. SkySoar's stock had fallen 64% since the incident with Malcolm Washington. Major corporate clients had terminated their contracts en masse. Ticket bookings were down 78%. Credit agencies had downgraded SkySoar's debt-to-junk status, making it nearly impossible to secure the emergency financing needed to maintain operations. The airline was hemorrhaging cash at an unsustainable rate. And now, after the FAA's preliminary findings about safety shortcuts had leaked to the press, passengers were canceling flights out of fear regardless of refund policies. The phone conference with the board was brief and brutal. "The numbers don't lie," Greg said. Eleanor Harrington, the board's longest-serving member. "We're 10 days from insolvency at the current burn rate. We can still turn this around," Peterson insisted, desperation bleeding through his usually confident tone. "I've prepared a comprehensive restructuring plan." "It's too late for restructuring," interrupted Michael Chen, representing the airline's largest institutional investor. "Our analysis shows SkySoar has a negative brand value at this point. The name itself has become toxic. Then we rebrand." "With what money?" Eleanor asked bluntly. "The class action lawsuit alone could exceed our insurance coverage by hundreds of millions. The DOT and FAA investigations will likely result in historic fines. And that's before we factor in the shareholder lawsuits for securities fraud related to the undisclosed settlements." "The board has made its decision," Greg Michaels stated flatly. "We're convening an emergency shareholder meeting to vote on filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection." "You can't do this," Peterson protested. "I built this airline." "And now you've destroyed it," Eleanor cut in, her voice ice cold. "The board is also voting on your termination for cause. Clear out your office by noon." When the call ended, Peterson sat motionless, staring at the wall of awards and photographs that chronicled his 30-year career in aviation. His eyes lingered on a photo of him shaking hands with Bradley Parker at an employee recognition ceremony 3 years earlier. The man whose actions had catalyzed SkySoar's downfall had been Peterson's protege, his fraternity brother, his friend. 45 minutes later, Peterson stepped onto the podium for what would be his final press conference as CEO of SkySoar Airlines. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and the confident posture that had characterized his leadership had collapsed into the slumped shoulders of a defeated man. SkySoar Airlines has proudly served millions of passengers for over 30 years, he began, voice-strained. The recent incident involving Mr. Washington and the subsequent investigations have created challenges that— He paused, scanning the room of reporters whose expressions ranged from anticipation to outright hostility. In that moment, something in Gregory Peterson snapped. "You know what? Forget the prepared statement," he said, shoving the paper aside. "The truth is, we're finished. The board is filing for bankruptcy. They've fired me. And honestly, they should have done it years ago." A collective gasp rippled through the press corps as cameras focused more intensely on the unraveling CEO. SkySoar has a culture problem, a racist culture problem, and I allowed it to fester. I protected people like Bradley Parker because they were one of us. I buried complaints, approved settlements, and told myself it was just managing difficult situations. But what happened to Malcolm Washington wasn't an isolated incident. It was the inevitable result of the environment I helped create. Reporters frantically scribbled notes as Peterson continued his extraordinary public self-immolation. The safety issues the FAA found, those are real too. We cut corners because profit margins in this industry are razor thin, and we convinced ourselves it was acceptable risk management. It wasn't. We endangered people's lives, and we did it disproportionately on routes serving minority communities because we calculated they had less political and economic power to fight back. Peterson's media team scrambled at the edges of the room, desperately trying to end the press conference. But security, perhaps sensing the historic nature of the moment, blocked their approach. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Peterson concluded, his voice breaking slightly. "But I want the thousands of good people who work for this airline to know that this failure is on leadership, not on them. And I want Malcolm Washington to know that he was right about everything. The system was rigged against him from the moment he stepped into that lounge, and I was part of rigging it." With those words, Peterson walked off the stage, ignoring the shouted questions that followed him. Within hours, trading of SkySoar stock was halted after dropping another 38% in the morning session. Major news outlets reported that flight crews and ground staff were quitting en masse, unwilling to be associated with the company's tarnished reputation. Passengers at airports across the country found their SkySoar flights canceled without notice as the operational infrastructure of the airline began to collapse. By mid-afternoon, the Department of Transportation had announced emergency measures to accommodate stranded SkySoar passengers on other carriers. By evening, the board issued a terse statement confirming that SkySoar Airlines was filing for bankruptcy protection and suspending all operations effective immediately. In San Francisco, Malcolm Washington watched these developments unfold in Amara Jackson's temporary war room surrounded by their legal team. The expression on his face remained unreadable. Peterson just torpedoed any defense they might have had in our lawsuit. Amara observed, re-watching his meltdown for the third time. He essentially admitted to everything we've been alleging. "It's not about the lawsuit anymore," Malcolm replied quietly. "An admission of guilt doesn't help the 5,000 SkySoar employees who just lost their jobs. It doesn't help Tiana Robinson, who put her career on the line to stand up for what's right." Malcolm stood and walked to the window, looking out at the San Francisco skyline as the sun began to set. "We need to think bigger." "What are you suggesting?" Amara asked, already recognizing the tone Malcolm used when a new vision was forming. "SkySoar is finished," Malcolm stated. But airlines don't just disappear. The routes, the gates, the planes, those assets have value. In bankruptcy, they'll be sold to the highest bidder. "You want to buy an airline?" Grace asked, incredulously. "Not the airline," Malcolm corrected. "The opportunity to build something better from its ashes." He turned back to the room. "Get me a meeting with the bankruptcy trustees and call Victor Chen at Horizon. I think our merger just got more interesting." That night, while the aviation industry reeled from SkySoar's spectacular collapse, Malcolm made a different kind of news. He appeared on a national news program, not to discuss the lawsuit or Peterson's confession, but to announce the formation of the Washington Foundation for Workplace Equity, a nonprofit organization dedicated to combating discrimination in corporate America. Funded initially with $50 million of Malcolm's personal fortune. "What happened to me at SkySoar was not unique," Malcolm explained to the interviewer. "The only unique aspect was that I had the resources and platform to fight back. Most victims of discrimination don't. This foundation will provide legal support, advocacy, and education to ensure that corporations understand discrimination isn't just morally wrong, it's bad business." When asked about SkySoar's bankruptcy, Malcolm's response was measured. "An airline collapsing doesn't solve the underlying problem. One company dies, but the systemic issues persist. What matters now is what rises from these ashes, and whether it addresses the root causes rather than just the symptoms." The interviewer pressed further. "There are rumors you might be interested in acquiring SkySoar's assets in bankruptcy. Any truth to that?" Malcolm offered a small, enigmatic smile. "Let's just say I believe in transformation more than destruction. Sometimes the most powerful response to injustice isn't tearing something down but rebuilding it the right way." As Malcolm spoke these words across the country, Bradley Parker was being arrested on charges of assault and battery with hate crime enhancements. Ryan Cooper, having turned state's evidence, was negotiating a plea deal. And federal investigators were expanding their probe beyond SkySoar to examine similar practices at other major carriers, suggesting the industry-wide reckoning had only just begun. The federal courthouse in Atlanta stood as a monument to justice, its neoclassical columns and imposing facade designed to inspire both awe and confidence in the American legal system. Today, those steps were packed with reporters, activists, and curious onlookers gathered for the most anticipated hearing in the SkySoar saga. Inside courtroom 4B, Malcolm Washington sat beside Amara Jackson as federal judge Elaine Henderson prepared to announce her ruling on the settlement agreement that would determine the fate of what remained of SkySoar Airlines. 3 months had passed since the company's spectacular collapse, months filled with intense negotiations, legal maneuvering, and a comprehensive restructuring plan that had surprised the entire aviation industry. "All rise," called the bailiff, as Judge Henderson entered the courtroom. Her stern expression gave no indication of her thoughts on the unprecedented agreement before her. "Be seated," she instructed, adjusting her glasses as she reviewed the documents. "This court has carefully considered the proposed settlement in the matter of Washington versus SkySoar Airlines. I must note that in my 30 years on the bench, I have never seen a settlement quite like this one." Malcolm maintained his characteristic composure, though beneath the table, his hand tightened slightly around the smooth wooden carving. His grandmother Eloise had pressed into his palm that morning, a small token she had carried during her own civil rights demonstrations decades earlier. The court finds that the proposed settlement meets all legal requirements and appears to serve the best interests of all parties involved, including the plaintiff, the creditors, the employees, and the public interest in maintaining vital air transportation services. Therefore, the settlement is approved as submitted. The judge's gavel fell with a decisive crack that echoed through the hushed courtroom. With that sound, a new chapter in American corporate history began, one that would be studied in business schools and law programs for generations to come. Outside the courthouse, Malcolm faced a forest of microphones and cameras. Beside him stood Victor Chen of Horizon Technologies, Tiana Robinson, and Amara Jackson, the core team that had engineered what many were calling a corporate miracle. Today marks not an ending, but a beginning. Malcolm stated, his voice steady and clear. Under the terms of the settlement approved by Judge Henderson, the newly formed Phoenix Airways will acquire the operational assets of SkySoar Airlines, including aircraft routes, gates, and operational infrastructure. Most importantly, we will be offering positions to all former SkySoar employees, except those directly implicated in discriminatory practices. This announcement drew applause from former SkySoar staff gathered at the edges of the press conference, many wearing makeshift Phoenix Airways pins, created by a grassroots employee movement that had sprung up in support of Malcolm's vision. Phoenix Airways will operate with a fundamentally different corporate structure, Malcolm continued. 40% of the company will be employee-owned through a stock ownership program. The Washington Foundation for Workplace Equity will hold a 30% controlling interest, with the remainder held by our strategic partner Horizon Technologies and a diverse group of minority investors. Victor Chen stepped forward to add, "This partnership combines Horizon's technological expertise with a revolutionary corporate culture. Phoenix Airways will not just be an airline. It will be a model for how American businesses can operate, with true equity and inclusion as core principles, not marketing slogans." The settlement represented a masterclass in creative, legal, and financial engineering. Malcolm had leveraged his personal fortune, the resources of Nexus Horizon, and a coalition of minority investors to purchase SkySoar's assets at bankruptcy auction. But the truly revolutionary aspect was the governance structure Amara had designed, one that ensured accountability, transparency, and structural safeguards against the discriminatory practices that had plagued SkySoar. For Tiana Robinson, whose brave stand had helped expose the truth, the day held special significance. When Malcolm invited her to the microphone, she spoke with the quiet confidence of someone who had found her voice. "I joined SkySoar 5 years ago, believing I could help change things from within," she said. "Today, I'm honored to announce that I will be serving as Phoenix Airways' first Chief of Workplace Culture and Inclusion, a position with real authority, board representation, and direct access to whistleblower protections." What happened to Mr. Washington was terrible, but from that terrible moment, something transformative is emerging. As the press conference concluded, a reporter called out, "Mr. Washington, do you consider this justice for what happened to you?" Malcolm paused, considering the question carefully. Justice isn't just about punishment for wrongdoing. True justice includes repair, restoration, and creating systems that prevent future harm. Bradley Parker and Ryan Cooper will face criminal consequences for their actions. Gregory Peterson has lost his career and reputation. But more importantly, thousands of airline employees keep their jobs under better working conditions. Passengers will experience truly inclusive service, and corporate America has been put on notice that discrimination isn't just morally wrong, it's existentially dangerous to your business. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. The rebranded Phoenix Airways unveiled its new visual identity, a stylized phoenix in vibrant purple and gold rising from abstract blue flames, a deliberate departure from SkySoar's conservative blue and silver. More substantive changes came in the form of comprehensive anti-discrimination training, revised service protocols, developed with input from civil rights organizations, and transparent reporting structures for passenger complaints. Malcolm insisted that Tiana lead the development of the new corporate culture. Her first initiative was creating an independent review board comprised of civil rights experts, former judges, and employee representatives to handle discrimination complaints. A board with real authority and direct reporting to shareholders. 60 days after the settlement, Malcolm stood on the tarmac at Atlanta International Airport beside the first aircraft to bear the Phoenix Airways livery. The atmosphere was electric as employees, many wearing their new uniforms designed by a renowned black fashion designer, gathered for the inaugural flight. "This moment belongs to all of you," Malcolm told the assembled staff. "You stood by your principles during the darkest days. You believed that your company could be better. Today we prove that ethical business isn't just a feel-good phrase, it's a viable, profitable model for the future." As he prepared to board the flight as a passenger rather than CEO, Malcolm had appointed aviation veteran Sophia Washington, no relation, to run daily operations. While he focused on the merged Nexus horizon, he spotted a familiar face in Ferry Birdie C. The crowd. Eloise Washington, now 91, but still standing straight and proud, was watching from a designated VIP area, tears glistening in her eyes. Malcolm walked over and embraced her gently. "What would Dad and Mom think of all this?" he asked quietly. "They'd be proud," Eloise replied, patting his cheek, "but not surprised." "You were always going to change the world, Malcolm. I just didn't know it would be by getting a bad haircut." They both laughed, a moment of lightness amid the weight of what they'd accomplished. Malcolm ran his hand over his head where his hair had grown back fully in the months since the incident. What had been intended as humiliation had become a symbol of resilience. The symbolism wasn't lost on the public. Phoenix Airways' first quarter in operation saw booking rates exceed projections by 42%. Corporate clients, many facing their own reckonings with diversity issues, rushed to partner with the airline that had become the gold standard for inclusive business practices. The employee stock ownership program created dozens of millionaires among long-serving staff members within the first year. 1 year to the day after the incident in the SkySoar lounge, Malcolm Washington stood at a podium again, this time addressing the graduating class of his alma mater, MIT. His commencement speech avoided easy platitudes, instead challenging the future business leaders, engineers, and scientists to consider the systems they were building. The most dangerous form of discrimination isn't the obvious kind, he told them. It's the systemic biases built into our institutions, algorithms, and business models, often invisible to those who don't experience them directly. When I stepped into that airport lounge a year ago, I encountered not just two bigoted individuals, but an entire corporate culture that had normalized their behavior, protected them from consequences, and devalued the experiences of those they harmed. He paused, scanning the sea of young faces, before continuing. Each of you will build systems, whether technological, financial, or social. As you do, I challenge you to ask, who does this system serve? Who might it harm? Whose voice is missing from the room where decisions are made? Because the truest measure of justice isn't what happens after harm occurs, it's creating systems where harm is neither tolerated nor hidden. After the ceremony, as Malcolm made his way through the crowd of well-wishers, his phone buzzed with a news alert. Bradley Parker had been sentenced to 4 years in prison for the assault and related hate crime charges. Ryan Cooper had received 18 months probation in exchange for his testimony against both Parker and SkySoar executives. And most significantly, the Department of Transportation had announced new industry-wide regulations requiring airlines to report discrimination complaints and settlements directly inspired by the Phoenix Airways model. That evening, as Malcolm boarded a Phoenix Airways flight back to Atlanta, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "We're honored to have Phoenix Airways founder on board with us today. Mr. Washington, on behalf of our entire crew, thank you for showing that justice doesn't just come from courts, it comes from having the courage to transform broken systems into something better." As the aircraft lifted into the evening sky, Malcolm gazed out the window at the MIT campus receding below. He thought about the journey from a child studying by flashlight in an apartment with unreliable electricity to a CEO whose response to injustice had changed an industry. The path hadn't been easy or straight. It had required sacrifice, persistence, and the willingness to stand up when it would have been easier to settle quietly and move on. But as Phoenix Airways climbed into the darkening sky, its wings gleaming in the last rays of sunset, Malcolm Washington knew that sometimes justice arrives in unexpected ways, and that transformation can emerge from even the darkest moments of humiliation and pain. Would you have stood up against discrimination like Tiana did? Or would you have stayed silent to protect your job? Drop a comment with your thoughts. If this story of justice and transformation inspired you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful, true stories. Share this video with someone who needs to believe that change is possible even in the most entrenched systems. Thank you for joining me on this journey from injustice to transformation. And remember, sometimes the most powerful response to discrimination isn't just tearing something down, but rebuilding it the right way. Malcolm Washington's journey teaches us that true justice extends beyond punishment. It requires transformative change. When faced with racism, he didn't just seek compensation. He rebuilt an entire system. The story demonstrates how discrimination persists, even for successful Black professionals, showing that no amount of achievement fully shields people from racism. It reveals how corporations often protect toxic cultures until forced to change through public accountability. Most importantly, this story highlights the power of principled allies like Tiana, who risk their positions to stand against injustice. It reminds us that systemic change demands both courage from individuals and structural reform from institutions. Malcolm's approach, transforming rather than merely destroying, offers a blueprint for addressing discrimination in all industries. His focus on employee ownership, transparent accountability systems, and meaningful inclusion policies demonstrates that ethical business practices aren't just morally right, they're economically viable. The ultimate lesson, creating just systems before harm occurs, is far better than seeking justice after the damage is done. What racism story from your life changed your perspective? Comment below and join this important conversation. Hit like if you believe companies should face real consequences for allowing discriminatory cultures to thrive. Subscribe for more powerful stories of justice and transformation. Share this video with someone who needs to see that change is possible, even in the most entrenched systems. Thank you for witnessing this journey from humiliation to triumph. Because sometimes the most powerful response to racism isn't just calling it out, but building something better in its place.